Hey there, Cheesemeisters, and welcome back to the Peach Pod After Dark. I am Jeff. Follow the money. And joining me on the other end of the internet, my cuz-host.
I'm Leslie, and I have a wife and a family and a dog and a cat.
It's important. The dog and the cat part, I think, is the most important. Who was it that said that? Because I remember it being said like 3 times, but I can't remember who it was.
It was said so much on the phone. I
Oh, it was
it's
one of the
going
early people they were interviewing, but I can't
yeah,
remember who it was.
I
Yeah,
can't remember either.
yeah.
It was as hard to keep up with names in this as it is on Game of Thrones.
That is interesting, and I think that's something that I want to talk about because I don't have that problem with this movie, and I think that that's a nature that is a byproduct of our ages and what we grew
Yes.
up knowing and being exposed to. This week, Cheesemeisters, we are doing All the President's Men, the 1976 typewriting, phone calling, door knocking masterpiece, directed by Alan J. Pakula, starring Robert Redford, Dustin Hoffman, Jack Warden, Martin Balsam, Hal Holbrook, Jason Robards, and a score of other folks, including Meredith Baxter and Stephen Collins from Seventh Heaven. We are doing this in conjunction with season 3, episode 11, A Presumption of Innocence. And our spelling connection this week is Martin Balsam, who was in an episode of Hotel, but also Stephen Collins, who was the dad in Seventh Heaven. We landed on this movie because we just didn't like. There were a couple ways we could have gone with this, right?
Yeah.
We could have gone with a movie about child molestation, which seemed fucking gross and not as much fun as one would hope. Um, or we could have gone with presumed innocent because the name of the episode is A Presumption of Innocence. But in the episode, Brandon makes a reference to Woodward and Bernstein, and so it was like, let's just do All the President's Men because it's a movie that I really really like and one you hadn't seen. So that can lead us in some fun directions. But there were a couple of interesting things that happened alongside of this choice that
Hmm.
are like not on purpose, but interesting and worth at least brushing by. The first, and we don't want to spend all that time here because oogie. Um, Google up Stephen Collins in around 2014, and you'll understand why there's a connection there that we didn't intend to make.
It's just
Um,
to
yeah,
what we tried to do. And we
especially especially considering he's one of our spelling connections. Um, so there's that. The other part of it that is less oogie and more interesting to me is we didn't choose presumed innocent, which I didn't realize until I was doing a little IMDbing here, is also directed by Alan J. Pakula. We chose a different one of his movies.
okay.
Right, which might have been kind of intentional in the writing of the episode. Like maybe they were like, we're calling it A Presumption of Innocence, and we can slide in this little thing about a different Pakula movie. Um, and also, as I thought about A Presumption of Innocence, it was a little like at the heart of the episode. If you choose to watch it in a way where you're not Gil Myers is fucking gross, is a guy being targeted by a system
Hmm.
when he is innocent of the charges. And that is very much a Pakula kind of thing. Like, that
Mm.
is very much a 70s thriller kind of thing where the system is wrong and there's someone at the heart of it just trying to survive it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, in like maybe they were trying to do that with that episode. Like maybe that's how it was structured a little bit, and we just didn't see it because we were focused on, fuck Gil.
Well, and I was just thinking in my evil, bitter brain too about whenever, I think this was in 2016, it doesn't matter, but someone was saying recently, like, hey, it's a scary world to be a man in right now. And I'm like, it seems like they thought the same thing in the 70s. And, it's not true. It's
Right.
cool.
I mean,
Stop it.
the 70s was an interesting time. And so this movie, by the way, if anyone doesn't fucking know what All the President's Men is about, this is a film adaptation of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein's book that they published in 75 ish about them uncovering what happened during the Watergate scandal, and which led to the resignation of Richard Nixon from office 50 years ago in August of 1974. So it's it's not about Watergate.
No.
It's not about what happened in Watergate. It's about how they found out what happened in Watergate.
Mm-hmm.
And so because it's about how they figured it out, and because it's only about a very specific period of time in the Watergate investigation, it runs from like June 72, when the break-in happened, to January of 73 when Nixon was inaugurated for his second term. It doesn't cover any of the stuff that happens after that, which is like all the congressional hearings and Nixon's resignation and his subsequent pardon by Gerald Ford, and like all of these things that when the movie came out, the audience had been living. And like they knew all this shit that I also, when I finally saw this movie, knew. Because I had grown up with it sort of, you know how you just know stuff and you're not even sure where you picked it up?
Yes, I do.
But there's like the names of the people involved in Watergate. I know those names. Like I know G. Gordon Liddy and I know Haldeman and Ehrlichman and Colson. Like I know all these names because of their role in this scandal, crime, cover up. I know Woodward and Bernstein and Ben Bradley, and I know Deep Throat. I know who Deep Throat is now, which we didn't until I don't remember when that news broke. I feel like it was 10 to 15 years ago when
I forget too.
yeah. And I knew what Deep Throat was and what it meant and all of those things. I just knew. But I'm feeling like you didn't.
No.
Yeah.
My once again, sorry to throw my AP US history teacher under the bus.
Yeah.
Keep him unnamed because he was a really good guy. You know, teaching in this country is hard, people. Teaching history is even harder.
It only covers so much.
Yeah, I mean, and also when the US history book only has one paragraph for the women's suffrage movement, I think, again, lots of problems, but we won't go into that soapbox today. Pun intended. Yeah, I know so little about the Watergate scandal, incident, problem. Again, I would like to think I know more than most people my age. But that's from things like watching Mad Men and other period dramas, trying to do research when I can, but like once again, I forgot to look up about Deep Throat because of course I know that is now that the porno came first and then this.
Right.
I thought it was the other way around.
It's a very political porno about giving head. Very weird.
I know, because I found that whole thing so strange. I was like, why are we not digging in? Why are we not asking more questions about who Deep Throat is? And the fact too that I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but that they, we see all this walking and calling and typing happen, and then Deep Throat finally gives him what he needs, and then they're
Right.
just able to write it. And I went, wait. Don't you need
Yeah.
to be able to have a source you can name? Don't you need to be able to like back up some of this, because you all have been going over the rules the whole time,
Mhm.
and I only got to take one journalism class in high school, but at the same time I was like, I feel like you can't just take this source who you have to keep anonymous and
Mhm.
print all this stuff and make what happened happen.
Right. Which in reality is correct. And that's what happened. Like,
Okay.
of course they vetted. I mean, that's what this whole movie is about, right? It's about how many times they had to get confirmation on something before they could run it. And
Mm-hmm.
like, even and then even it could blow up and fuck you, right? So, but I think for the dramatic tension of the movie, like you got to get to a point where like Woodward is right. Just fucking tell me. God damn it. This is frustrating. Like, I'm losing my mind trying to like follow your breadcrumbs. Just can you just tell me something, please?
Yeah.
And which is kind of what the audience would feel like after watching them very slowly pull the threads of this thing and follow the money and figure it out, and this person, that person, and we're inside the White House, and do we have confirmation, and the Attorney General and the money in the safe and creep and all of the shit. um and it's such a slow process, which is why I love the movie, because it is methodical
Mm-hmm.
and it is detailed, and it makes boring shit super interesting.
Yes.
But then you do have to come to some kind of a resolution that feels a little cathartic.
Yeah.
And so what happens is he gives them information finally, and then they run it down and they're able to corroborate it. But
Mm-hmm.
they skip the corroboration part at the end of the movie, because just like that's your release of tension is supposed to be happening right there,
Yeah.
right? Like the kind of the climax of the movie is that scene in the parking garage where Deep
Yeah.
Throat unloads all this information, and you're like, fuck, finally. And then you've got to kind of come to a resolving action. You can't then go, oh my god, that was so great, let's verify every little, and because you lose sort of that piece of narrative arc. um but you're right, like in reality that's not that's not how that works.
No, and I think that was the one movie thing, because again, like you, I was learning along the way, like, oh, this is how long it would take. This is how long it should take. Something
Mm-hmm.
of this magnitude. And again, no one wants to believe that anyone in their government is capable of doing anything bad. We don't
Mm-hmm.
want that. But if that is going to be the case, we sure as hell hope that they're going to be smart enough to make it difficult. Like,
Right.
you hope that they're at least smart about it and not being stupid in a weird way. I feel like, because again, we don't want, because it all reflects back on the American people. We don't want to feel like we're stupid and making stupid choices.
Right. Here's the thing with that though. One, that's a weird thing to want. Better criminals. um you're Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. um
Listen, here to say the things that people don't want to really admit about themselves. You're
I
welcome,
gotcha.
America.
I got you. No, that's it's fair, and it's helpful. You're doing a service. Um, but it's the truth of the matter is these guys are fucking morons.
Yeah,
Like the
they usually
the
are.
yeah, Watergate was committed. The whole thing is a stupid, unnecessary plan, done at the behest of an incredibly paranoid person, Nixon, who had enemies lists, um, like honest to God enemies lists, and yeah, um, and it was executed by fucking clowns. And that's part of what you don't get in this movie, because it's not about how dumb the people doing the Watergating are. It's about how hard it is to prove it and to prove what they did, even when what they did is so incredibly chowder-headed. And there are and I want to talk about this later in What Else Time, but there's some other really good stuff, drama stuff, TV shows, podcasts that you can watch and listen to about Watergate that fleshes all this stuff out. And some of it, like one of them, I only watched like the first couple episodes and I would like to go back and finish it, is it seems to be a comedy. Because it's like, boy, these guys are fucking dumb. So, but it's hard to prove crimes on this scale that have this big of a potential impact. Like Ben Bradley's right, you're talking about possibly tearing down the United States government.
Yeah, and in order to do that, you really do have to take your time to make sure that no stone is left unturned. Otherwise,
you better get it right.
Yeah, you better get it right. I was going to add too, I think we like smarter villains as opposed to dumb villains. No one likes Captain Hook. He's stupid. He is stupid. You know?
Yeah.
But people are intrigued by Maleficent because she's smart and she's cunning.
I always just thought she was fucking creepy. Like the way she was drawn that way.
Excuse me.
You know what I mean?
I want to be here.
No, I know, but scared the shit out of me.
Like, oh, and there's the door thing. You know, her mood at not being invited to a party, I get that, honey.
No,
like,
yeah.
Oh, you forgot me first.
For me, it's more like, cool, I'm going to sit here.
You know, I'll get there.
So, I'm curious what you knew about Watergate before watching this.
I knew it involved a hotel.
Okay.
I knew Nixon was behind it.
Uh-huh.
Or a part of it. Now I'm clouded from this movie. What else did I know? I knew someone named Deep Throat was involved.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's all I can say for the American education.
Had you not heard the acronym CREEP before?
No, and so I also did not hear them say creep. I heard Crete, and I went, what are creeps doing?
They're not, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So CREEP, for anyone who doesn't know, is the Committee to Re-elect the President. It just has it's a terrible acronym. It's really bad. It's apt.
Taken over by creeps.
Well, I mean, it's apt in this shit for sure. Yeah. But like, there's a scene in the West Wing where Leo and Josh, I think it's Leo and Josh, shake hands, and Leo says, "We just formed the committee to re-elect the president." Like, you know, it's like, oh, but like not in an evil way. They didn't say this in the movie at all, but have you heard the term plumbers?
No.
Okay. The people who were charged with, like, who did this thing, who like set up the robbery, or the bugging. It wasn't a robbery. Were you clear on that they were breaking into the Democratic Party's national headquarters in the Watergate building to plant surveillance devices so that the Nixon campaign could spy on the opposition?
I knew they were breaking in. I did not realize it was the DNC, or that they were planting stuff. Again,
Yeah.
that's what's always so complicated about this crime. It's I have no idea what is happening, and because the movie is not meant to be about that, maybe they were a bit more lenient on some of the things. And also, like, this was mere years after it happened.
Uh-huh.
Like we know more now, not me, but
I don't
if we
think
were
so.
to
I
make
think
this.
they knew more then.
Oh, okay. I just feel like if you were able to remake this movie now, I thought maybe it would be more clear, but maybe that's not true.
I It would have to be more clear if you made it now. Making it then, you didn't have to
Yeah.
because everybody knew. Like
Mhm.
everybody knew what happened in Watergate. And by this point,
Yeah.
this was again, this is about Woodward and Bernstein just figuring it out.
Hmm.
But by the time the movie comes out, everybody already knew what happened. They
Yeah.
knew the people who did it. They knew what they were doing. They knew how they were caught. They knew that Nixon was involved because like the congressional hearings on Watergate were broadcast live on TV
Hmm.
and in the middle of the day because it's Congress. They don't do prime time investigations. They do it in the middle of the afternoon when they're at work. Like that's their job. So, but they're like people would like go to bars on their lunch hour and watch the hearings. And so people knew all about this stuff. They knew about the like other things that aren't in this movie. Um, they knew that Nixon recorded all of his conversations in the Oval Office. And at the time, I don't think it was known why he did that, except for that he was very paranoid. But it came out years later. I don't remember where I heard this, but it was actually Lyndon Johnson's idea. Like Johnson told him, he said, "Hey, it makes it a lot easier to write your memoir if you have all this shit recorded."
Oh.
So Johnson set up a recording system in the West Wing for the purposes of being able to write his own memoir and advised Nixon, "You should probably do this." And Nixon was like, "That's a good idea. I'm going to do it." And then so we know that this shit got recorded, and audiences in 1976 also knew that 17 minutes of it was erased. And so when it was given over to Congress, and this section was missing, very damning,
Mm.
right? People in 1976 knew that Nixon was reelected in a landslide because the Democrats were a fucking mess in 1972.
Yikes.
And yeah, and yay Vietnam. Um,
Oh.
but yeah, it's bad. It's bad. But they knew that he lost support of his entire party, and rather than be impeached, as the like articles of impeachment were presented, I believe, but weren't. He was not impeached because they were not voted on. He resigned earlier, before that happened. So when I grew up, the question of who's the only president who's ever been impeached, it was a trick question because people were like, Nixon. No, not Nixon. Andrew Jackson. Not Nixon. Now there are two other answers to add to that list. Um, so
See, and I
we knew
didn't know
that
Andrew Jackson was impeached. That's amazing.
he was. Yep. Um,
Why is
and
he
we
on the
know that
$20 bill?
he's a bad guy. Um,
Sorry, America. Sorry, listeners. I just got very mad. Even more.
uh-huh,
Like I'm already mad that he's on there and we don't have Tubman's yet. But like,
uh-huh. Andrew Jackson, not a good guy.
I know he's not a good guy.
Not a good guy. I don't know. So everyone knew that Nixon resigned. Everyone knew that I believe at this point that Gerald Ford had pardoned Nixon.
Oh.
Yeah. At, our long national nightmare is over, is what he said.
Okay.
Yeah, pardon Nixon so that we weren't able to get a trial on this shit. So it left so much stuff sort of out there and hanging. But the audience of who read this book and then watched this movie knew all of this stuff. So you don't have to explain it to an audience in 1976.
True.
You do this in 2024, you have to explain this stuff because people don't know Liddy, Ehrlichman, Haldeman, Colson. They don't know those people. They don't even know Nixon. you know?
So much went over. Not so much, but like I'm really glad that I didn't get. There were only a couple times where I felt the need to look at my phone because I wanted to either look up an actor or something
Mm.
with this, but I knew I was going to have to pay attention to this
Hmm.
because again, I know so little about Watergate. Most people do not
Yeah.
because again, we don't want to teach history properly because if we do, then we won't repeat mistakes.
I mean, I do think that there's that, but I also think that it's like, there's not enough time. Like,
No,
when,
there's
when
not. That's so true.
when I was in grade school, we got through World War II, right?
Wow.
Pretty much. Like, we got up through World War II in history class. But like, I was born um before this movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
So I like this was always in the consciousness of the people. Like, this was part of what was talked about. So I grew up learning about this, at least a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, because it was just a thing that people knew, and you lose that over time. Like, that kind of fades. So people don't spend a lot of time now talking about Watergate because other much crazier shit has happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and and but Watergate, like, it was so ubiquitous that it changed the language, because any scandal or cover up since then has been called something gate.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they just stick gate on the end of things, and I'm like, that's fucking stupid, but that's just the way language works.
Yeah.
So things get made a gate, which is a reference to this because it's a conspiracy, um and it was such a big fucking deal. So, and that's what it's interesting to me, like, those things that need to be explained and those that don't, based on when you make it.
Here, yes. And I was looking at my notes really quickly because I was getting dizzy from all the shaking of my head I've been doing this episode. Um, it's tough. But so when Woodward is getting, there's a scene where Bob is getting info from Stans. Or about Stans, I think.
Mhm.
Dahlberg is admitting to where this money went, and he's, I don't know, I just did this and this. But Bob is, I think, on the right side of the screen, and in the background, you see everyone crowded around the TV. And I was like, everyone's watching something on the TV. What is happening? Like,
Mhm.
is this when Nixon's resigning?
Sure.
I was so confused. But then they all seemed happy. And later on, you can tell, like, it's more clear why people are around their TV because, again, it's Inauguration Day.
Oh, that part. Yeah.
But in this moment when he's getting there were two distinct moments when someone is on the phone and stuff is happening in the background and the camera is slowly panning into Bob and Carl.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just one of those, and I was like, what is happening?
That's one of the reasons I think this movie is so good, is because it, like, one, it's about mundanity. Like, it is about taking notes and making phone calls and knocking on doors. And this is a thing that, like, Robert Redford single finger types, and I don't know if that's how Bob Woodward types or not, but Dustin Hoffman is typing, and I don't know if that's how Carl Bernstein typed. I don't know if they were, like, if that's accurate to the actual people, or if it's just the way, like, Robert Redford doesn't know how to type. I just don't know.
From what I know about Dustin Hoffman as an actor, everything he does, you can pretty much count on it's probably something that person did, because I think he's a method actor.
He's deeply method.
Yeah, he's not as despicable as some, but it again, it does not leave a great flavor in my mouth.
He's
because I love Dustin Hoffman, but
yeah, and I think he's less method, as he grew up, but or got older. I'm not saying he was a child in this, but
because in the moment he was running, I went, and I know he was running, getting ready for this. Like, good God. And then the
I'm sure.
smoking,
Yeah.
I'm sure too. I'm like, well, those were definitely real.
Oh, well, of course they were. Yeah. Is there any place you don't smoke?
No.
I really like that. And then the elevator door opens and the smoke just comes out. I thought that was pretty fun. Um, yeah, there's a Dustin Hoffman is in this movie in the early '70s called Marathon Man, with Laurence Olivier, and
Oh,
he
yes.
is
You're going to tell
yeah
my favorite thing.
yeah. It's a good movie. It's a really good movie. If you've seen Uncut Gems, I recommend watching Marathon Man.
Okay.
If you saw Uncut Gems and liked it and liked that tension, watch Marathon Man. It's also kind of set in the same part of New York, so that's kind of fun. But there's a scene where Hoffman is supposed to, like, his character has been up for days, and
Yep.
so he himself, Dustin Hoffman, stayed up for, I don't know, 28 hours, something like a really long amount of time, so that he was as haggard as the character. And Olivier looks at him at one point and is like, "It's called acting."
I
Like,
know.
why don't you try acting?
My boy,
You
have
don't
you
have to
tried
do this.
acting?
Yeah, my boy, have you tried acting? Yeah,
I
it is
do that
so.
all the time.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Um, but the thing I was going to say before the Olivier thing was, um, they do such a good job of making that mundane interesting, but also putting it in a setting that was exactly as chaotic as they presented it. Like, I've listened to I listen to Tony Kornheiser a lot. He's got a podcast. He's a sports guy on ESPN. He's a sports guy. He's a PTI guy on ESPN. Um, and he that was my James Carville impression, by the way.
Okay.
Um, yeah, just measure my penis with me on the airplane. Um,
Jesus.
he said that once on Kornheiser's podcast. He was talking about, like, the TSA screenings, and he travels so much. He's like, I don't care. Just measure my penis and let me get on the damn airplane. It's so funny. Carville's special. He's wonderful. Anyway, Kornheiser worked at the Washington Post. He worked for Ben Bradley. After Watergate, like, he didn't come to the Post until late '70s. But the reason he wanted to come to the Post, and the reason why so many people went into journalism, is because of Watergate, because of Woodward and Bernstein. But I have heard him talk about how that's exactly what the newsroom was like. It is that much chaos. It's that much people going back and forth, conversations happening. This is going on over here. And meanwhile, you're trying to talk to this person on the phone and take notes.
Yeah.
And I think they captured that really, really well. And that adds this tension to what they're doing. Because if they made this movie where it's where every time they wanted to make a phone call, they went into a room by themselves, it would be so boring.
It would be, and it just, again, people were built differently. I think I mean, I see people talking on their phones on the subway in New York, not minding that they're being loud, not caring that people around them are loud. And I'm like, this is insane to me. But at the same time, it's just another thing people learn to deal with. And I think at that time too, like, the newsroom is busy and loud. I have to be, in order to be a good journalist, I need to learn how to focus in on this call. And oh my God, when I tell you how, we'll get to it when we talk a needle drop, but just the sounds of this movie were like an orchestra to me. I mean, I didn't grow up in that time, but I grew up in a time of landlines still. And I mean, I love the sound of the phone either ringing, putting it down, just
the dial.
I miss real phones.
I don't miss. Look, we grew up where the area code was 812. When you got, and then my number had a 9 in it. Brrr. People, I had lots of 8s and 7s, and it's just a lot. There's a lot of this motion.
I have a solution for you. Have you heard of a cigarette holder?
You still got to do it.
Okay.
I mean, my problem wasn't. It's not the same amount of work. My problem wasn't The problem wasn't that my index finger hurt. It was just, this is a lot. And if you didn't quite, if it slipped, like if you get to this, and now listen, we didn't have to dial area codes all that often.
No, you didn't.
But 9 was in my phone number. Like, and I still know Grandma's phone number, and it has an 8 in it. It actually has 2 8s in it. So, but if you would get like almost all the way around and your finger slipped, and I got to start over. No, dialing rotary phones is a pain in the ass.
Boo-hoo. I'm saying boo-hoo to you from the older generation, even though I'm younger than you. I'm saying boo-hoo to your problems.
No, I'm telling you things. There are ways that the world is worse, and there are ways that the world is better. Touch is way easier, and saying call Johnny is way easier. Okay?
I miss it.
Yeah.
I miss not being tied to my phone. I love leaving it in another room.
Someone who works in an office and has to be on phone calls, noise canceling headphones are great. They're great. Like Woodward and Bernstein didn't have noise canceling headphones. They had their finger in the other ear if they felt like it. Like that's so some technology advancements are for the better, and most of them around telephonics, I'm going to say better.
I just realized too, because I remember there was a time when, when cell phones first came out and they were talking about how, people's necks and things are going to be ruined and hurt because they're always looking down and all this. And I'm like, but you had a whole generation doing this, head to shoulder doing that business. I'm like, yeah, doing the Thriller move.
Yeah.
Like,
it sucked. Well, I don't know. I don't know. My wife's at the chiropractor literally right now. So.
Well, and okay, I keep feeling self-conscious for how much I'm moving, but also my back hurts. And I've been doing this pod on an uncomfortable chair for the last few weeks.
Gotcha.
I'm fine. I just worry that people think I have a problem.
No.
I do.
I think I'm around too. Yeah. I think that people who watch the podcast, they don't stare at us the entire time. Like,
God, I hope not. Please don't.
I do. I'm good looking.
I mean, look at me. But I don't want people staring at me.
I don't fucking know. All right. We've talked about so much, and very little of it's actually about the movie, but it is about the movie. I'm curious to see what intimacy there is in this that you want to talk about. Let's have some adventures.
I'm glad you asked.
I was always gonna.
I know. Okay, so there's not a lot in this because thankfully, in the way smart people make historical films, they realized there's not a love story in this. We don't have to put a love story in this. However,
not about that.
There is a lot of flirting for information.
Oh yeah, there is.
Which, because part of me wanted to go like, oh, the 70s. And I went, no, we still do this. This is a way, like flirting for information is definitely a thing.
You want to make people comfortable. When they're comfortable and they feel like you like them, they will open up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this might be the first time I admit this on the show. This is probably one of those movies where you don't need one. You could at least have a consultant. Because there's definitely things, again, like the flirting for information, what are you trying to get? What are you trying to show? Like, you can still position your bodies in a different way. Like, when Dustin Hoffman is talking to that first woman, I don't know if they were on a date or not. I'm thinking they are, but they're just full on facing each other. And you know what? I'm going to assume from that stance that it's a date because they were both there for the other person and for, possibly other fun stuff.
I don't think it's a date. I think it's a he invited her out to talk to her about this, and she knew that,
Oh,
that
okay.
it was a social setup,
Well,
kind of
okay, so they're still facing each other,
thing.
which goes into my next thing. How bodies reveal and hide.
Hmm.
And when they're talking to, see, again, I never got any of the names, and for the women they were especially mysterious.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
There's
two, a lot of the, like, there's a lot of characters in this who are smushing together of people,
oh, of
because, like,
course.
just because it's way too hard if you're going to talk about the actual number of people involved in this. For storytelling purposes, sometimes 3 people have to be one person, and then that conversation covers like 3 different conversations. Like, sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Well, and I've talked on this again about like the ingredients of
Hmm.
building or creating an intimate scene or of that kind. And one of the ingredients is who's open and who's closed, or like are your
Mm.
positions to each other open and closed. And in one of the scenes, they're talking to a woman, and at first she's like kind of okay, kind of open, but she slowly gets more and more behind the door with each time
Mhm.
that they come to visit her. And the final time, she's like kind of face pressed against it, and she starts crying, but again, you can and that kind of body language says like, I do want to tell you, but I can't, I'm scared, and
I'm
this door is
exactly.
shielding me, so
Hmm.
please. And
Yeah.
again, actors can probably figure that out on their own. A director can also probably direct them in that, but again, someone like me can add to
Mhm.
that in case if it's
Yeah,
needed.
yeah. Right.
In another shot there was a stairway between Carl and the woman.
Uh
Like,
huh.
okay, this felt like pure 70s 60s house layout, just like, because you have the door and then immediately there's a stairway, but there's not just a
Uh
stairway
huh.
up. There are 2 little steps on either side going down into these rooms
Yeah,
that are
this
the
it's a
ground
split
level.
level. Yeah.
It's okay, so that's a split level. It was strange, but it was
Yeah.
interesting. It worked for this scene because again,
Mm-hmm.
there's something between them.
Mm-hmm.
She's on the other side. He's there doing his, like, oh sure, I'll take coffee. Uh
Mm-hmm.
Coffee and cigarettes. There's always
So
some kind of
much.
intimacy around coffee and cigarettes, you
Yeah.
know? And as bad as smoking is, boy oh boy, does it lend itself easily to like, oh, you got a cigarette? Can I have
Right.
a light?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you
It's
have
a
the
force
length
of
of
the social
this.
interaction.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you do with that now.
Right.
Length of this vape gel? I don't know. Again, shows you how little I know about vaping.
Yeah. I don't
Um,
know. Is there gel involved?
but they show, what are those called? The stairwell spokes on the railing. They like
The banister,
the
the rail. Yeah, the
banister.
railing.
They like show, she's like
Yeah.
sort of behind, which again also kind of looks like she's afraid of going to prison. Maybe I don't think that's it,
Mhm.
but again, hiding and
Yeah.
how interesting that is. We get a lot of play with light and shadows.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment where Carl and Bob are talking to Sloane, and Sloane is in shadow, but the light is on them.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
There's a lot of play with light and dark in this movie.
Yeah. So again,
Yeah.
probably don't need an intimacy person on this, but you can sure as hell talk to one and see if there's something that you
Mm-hmm.
missed.
Yeah.
But I found the flirting with information to be the most uh interesting,
Mm-hmm.
again, to make people comfortable. And especially when they go over to the female journalist and they're like, hey, you
Right.
used to be with so and so, right? Why don't you want to talk to him? How would that be?
Right.
Like, that was so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's meant to be.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah, that is meant to be as uncomfortable as it feels, because they know they need to do this, and they know it's kind of gross.
and
But we need this information. We have to get it. It's more important than how uncomfortable this is and how we feel terrible for asking you to do this, because we know it sucks, but we need this. Like
And
that's how
Bob
important
plays the
it is.
tactic, and you see him look over his shoulder later to see if it worked. But
Right,
he
where he
plays
walks
the
away.
tactic of, yeah, don't worry about it. We don't want you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. And I'm like,
Uh-huh. Yeah, but it worked.
it worked.
Yeah,
And, you know, it's more damning to this man who calls later on and calls her. It's more
right.
damning to him to be for them to, he doesn't care about what they might say that he said. He cares about where he said it.
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
again, very apt for that time. People nowadays would probably, there is something to read into a man being in a woman's apartment, but nowadays that would not make people blush as much as it did then.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Needle drop time?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So there's no music in this at all. Like but it is the sound of the world around them that sort of creates the tension and the like just the noise of it all. And it's very tactile. You know,
Yes.
the clicking of the typewriters and the dialing of the phone, like you said, and the picking it up and the putting it down and the knocking on doors. It's just the sound of the world.
Yeah.
And I think it's super effective in this movie. Like you don't
Especially
need a lot
with,
of boom, 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 boom.
no, especially with it ending with typewriting.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's the work.
It's jarring. Yeah, it's the work.
Yeah. So I just think it's super effective. I really like it a lot.
Yeah. I
Um,
like it too.
yeah. There's not a lot to say about it. It's just fucking effective. It was a choice well made. You know.
Yeah.
All right. What else time? So defining roles is this is like a topsy-turvy defining roles.
Okay.
Because I don't think necessarily that Robert Redford's defining role is is Bob Woodward. And I don't
No.
think Dustin Hoffman's defining role is Carl Bernstein. And I don't think Jason Robards' defining role is Ben Bradley.
No.
But when I think of Ben Bradley, I picture Jason Robards. When I think of Bob Woodward, I think of Robert Redford. And when I think of Carl Bernstein, even though I know who all of these people are and what all of them look like, I think of Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
It is the exact flip of the defining role. Like these are the defining views of these real people, which is weird.
Yeah.
You know? But that's how again, this movie is almost as old as me. My whole life, Robert Redford has been Bob Woodward.
Wow.
You know, like that's what Bob Woodward looks like. I can picture him and Bob Woodward is very square jawed. Like it's good casting. And Carl Bernstein is very oval faced, like Dustin Hoffman is, and it's again small and again great casting. But that's who I picture in my head when you say Woodward and Bernstein. I think of Redford and Hoffman.
Nice.
Yeah.
See, going with in discussing Ben Bradley. So that was while I was watching this, and one of the times that I looked up because I went, wait, the Washington Post, Ben Bradley, I know these names. And I realized it's because I watched The Post just this year.
Yeah.
Movie.
Is that Tom Hanks playing Ben Bradley?
It is. And so I watched it and I'm like, oh, this is very odd for me because this guy is distinctly older, or at least looks distinctly older because we age better than we did. Because we've all got portraits in the attic.
Also, this did happen after the events of the Post. So, you know, the Pentagon Papers happened first. But yeah, yeah.
What?
Yeah. Pentagon Papers happened.
Jeez.
No.
Oh my God, I feel stupid now.
No. I mean, like the way you reacted, let me make sure that I'm fucking right. But no, they're about Vietnam, and they came out in the middle of Vietnam. Um,
Oh man, I feel ridiculous now. Well, it's still good and timely.
uh, here we go. Yeah. Yep. In 1967, June of
Oh, okay.
71, the report was leaked. So, but all of this stuff happens. That's the other thing that this movie doesn't like. It doesn't deal with, and as such is not a thing I knew because I sort of only knew what was in the firmament. Is it But this follows like a year later after the Pentagon Papers. Like it is right there.
So then it's like old hack for this paper to expose things about the country. Like, I think
A
that was the
little
thing that
bit.
was bothering me about this and why I got confused because
Mm,
they act like they don't normally do this. And I'm like, this is the Washington Post. Is this new to
right. It's new to Woodward and Bernstein, obviously, because they're new there. They hadn't been
yeah.
there that long. It's not new to the other folks in the room sometimes, which is why there's a little bit of that political pull back and forth. Like you just want to take this story for your part of the paper. Um, but Ben Bradley knows what he's doing. And that's one of the reasons why he's like, you don't have it. I need more
Yeah.
sources. This
Yeah.
isn't good enough. Like I can't print this, you know? Um, and so I think that's I don't remember why because of the depiction of Ben Bradley. I have not seen the paper or the
The
post.
Post.
I have not seen the post, but I guarantee you that when I do, I will compare Tom Hanks's Ben Bradley to Jason Robards' Ben Bradley. I
Of
just will,
course.
because that's the definition of who that guy is to me in my head. He's fucking Robards. Um, Deep Throat is Hal Holbrook, like in shadow, you know. But he's definitely that's because, and also because like until the early aughts or whenever it was, we didn't know that uh, Mark Felt was Deep Throat. We didn't know his name. We just knew like Deep Throat, and we knew that Deep Throat in a parking garage, mostly in shadow, is fucking Hal Holbrook. Like that's just what it is. So yeah, for me it's like an inverse of defining roles. Like these are the roles that define my image of the real people.
I wonder
So
if his tombstone says, "Here goes Deep Throat."
I don't think so.
I
Um,
would like it to.
did I tell you this? This is so off the topic, but you just said Tombstone. Someone I used to work with. Someone I used to work with. There was something that happened in their neighborhood, and her husband was on the news as like a local, what happened here, sir, kind of thing, and it said his name. And like it puts the caption on the bottom of the screen in the Chiron. It gives the name and like a description about the person.
Mhm.
Um, and his said, and this is not his name, I'm just making up a name, but it said Mark Johnson lives nearby. And now that's what I want on my tombstone. I just wanted to say, even though I'm going to be cremated, I just wanted to say Jeff Taylor lives nearby. That's all.
Nice.
Because that would make me happy. Yeah, I think that's a funny joke. Because I am nearby, but I'm not living. So anyway, um, yeah, it works on many, many levels. So what do you have for what else time?
I may not have anything.
Okay, I have a few things. So
Go for it. Yeah.
okay, we talked about this a little bit, but movies as historical artifacts
Yes.
is interesting to me, and related to that, and something that I wrote down earlier, but we just didn't talk about it. But art in troubled times about those troubled times is really interesting, and that's what this is. Like when, as I said, when Ford pardoned Nixon, he said our long national nightmare is over. The 70s aesthetically are dark and in shadow and full of paranoia, and movies like this, like The Parallax View, which is also a Pakula film, 3 Days in the Condor. Like there's a
Seen
lot
that.
of. It's a great movie. Also Redford.
Yeah.
There are so many um, paranoid thrillers in the 70s because that was the vibe. It was the vibe of the thing.
Damn.
Was the because wait, the government is this corrupt? The government is this secretive? The government is doing who can we trust if we can't trust our institutions?
No one.
Right. And that's the vibe of the thing. And so this movie is of its time because it's about its time, but it feels like its time, even though it's part of the reason why the time feels that way.
Yes.
But because this movie is about the things it's about when they happened, when everyone still remembers, when everyone still feels it, like everyone feels a way in 1976 about Watergate.
Yeah.
Even Leonard Skinner. Watergate didn't bother him. Them. I know, but it's one person saying it. Um, and but they
Do you
also
feel
like the governor of Alabama, so fuck Leonard Skinner.
do you feel like it's a more honest portrayal, even though there's probably going to be more information that comes out later on? But like I wonder because it's from that time and still has the vibe of the thing. Um,
Uh-huh. I think
Somehow
it's
it
more
feels like it's
emotionally
more.
honest.
Yes,
Yeah,
I would
it's more
agree.
emotionally accurate. They leave out details because again, the details that the tape and like they talk a little bit about what a whack job G. Gordon Liddy was, but they just touched the surface on this guy. Like these other shows, I'm going to recommend one. You got to watch them because this guy's G. Gordon Liddy was crazy. Uh,
Oh,
like wild shit. This guy was just out there. Um, so like but you don't know all that. Then you don't know about the tapes and the erasures and all of that stuff. Ehrlichman isn't even mentioned in this movie. They talk about other people that you don't remember quite as much because they're what's the guy's name whose name's on the check? Bergman or something?
uh, Dahlberg. I thought
Dahlberg. And who was it?
Dahlberg.
Yeah, Dahlberg. There was a Berg in there. I couldn't remember where it was. Dahlberg. That's a name I don't even remember. And
Yeah.
Stans, not a name I remember because those are the people that were necessary. They're behind the scenes to learning the story. They weren't the people that we learned the story about. You
Mm.
know, they were like the source of the story, not the subject of the story. So here you make them the subject a little bit more. But the things I grew up knowing about are those guys: Haldeman, Ehrlichman, Liddy, Colson, fucking Nixon, like all of it. It's just a crazy thing. But it has defined in a lot of ways my image of Watergate and the things that happened because of the movie. Like the movie
Yeah.
has placed in amber these images of this period and this thing in a way that it wouldn't have if it was made in 1994 looking back. You know?
Yeah. And you've had me thinking about what are movies from that are about, stuff from, my time being alive.
Mhm.
And it's really sad because I can't think of any right now, but like, one, I've also made the choice to not watch stuff about 9/11 because
Yep.
I just, you know, I don't I don't need to. I don't want
Right.
to.
Uh-huh.
I would imagine there are probably a lot of people who similarly didn't want to watch anything about Pearl Harbor or Watergate.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Sure.
Watergate is very different, of course, but again, that is a national crisis.
Mhm.
Um, there will be movies made about what we're currently going through that
Mhm.
it will take some time for me to want to watch because living it
Uh-huh.
is really not fun.
Right.
Um, you know, I remember during the pandemic telling a friend, uh, something along the lines of like, I am so tired of living in, you know, a big historical moment. And she was like, but we're always living in history. Like, that's just,
Huh?
that is just life. Um,
Yeah. And it's interesting. I had lunch with a friend of mine from high school. I don't know, a couple months ago. The same day. That's who I was having lunch with when I went to the 90210 Starbucks bathroom coat
nice.
Starbucks. Yeah. Um, and he and I were talking about. Shouts to Andy, by the way. He and I were talking about, like, when you look back at the art of the 20s, the 1920s, how, like, we were like, why wasn't anyone talking about the fact that there was just this pandemic? But
Uh huh.
if you look at the art of now, people are also not doing that because they don't fucking wanna.
We don't
You
want
know?
to. It's
Yeah.
really like the shows that do reference it happening didn't do well. No one
Mm-mm.
wanted to be seeing other people struggling. And
Right.
it's one of those things that I think about this a lot in terms of like how I want to tell my own story and how biopics are told. And
Hmm.
there are things that are really difficult to convey. Like there's a
Hmm.
reason why when telling stories about people in troubling times, we have to find the tangible thing, like this person was cheated on, these people were killed. Like
Hmm.
it's really hard to convey a feeling
Hmm.
and not bring everyone down. Like to tell the story of the pandemic is going to be similar to watching Melancholia. It's going to take you many days if you're me to watch it because it's just sadness. It's
Right.
loneliness.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know about you, but there's so much of that time that I'm already forgetting because one, it was monotony. And then two,
Right.
my brain is like, we don't want to remember this.
Hmm.
It
I
wasn't as
was
devastating for me as it could have, as it was for many others, but it was still
right.
very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Stephen King has done some stuff with it that is interesting. Um, his his book, Holly,
Oh,
that came out last year, I think. Um, for people who aren't like Stephen King readers, there's a character, named Holly Gibney that, um, she was introduced in. There's a trilogy of books he wrote, about, like a retired police officer, and she helps him like solve crimes and stuff, and she's neurodivergent in some way that it's never
hmm.
like exactly like what it is that is going on, but there's difference. Um so in Holly, the most recent book, he kind of fell in love with this character, and he's brought her into other stories.
Nice.
um yeah, and but then he gave her this whole book, Holly, and it takes place during the pandemic.
Mm.
And um and he deals with it by like making it very much a part of the reality of the story. Like, her mother just recently died of COVID, and she
Oh.
had to experience that through a Zoom connection.
Um,
And every time she is talking to somebody, there's a mention of, she took her masks down, or are you vaxxed? I'm vaxxed. We can take our masks down. Or are you vaxxed? Fuck no, I'm not doing that. Then Holly leaves her mask up. Like, there's all of that stuff that we were doing, you
yeah.
know, and all of that stuff that was, some people feel this way about it, some people feel that way about it. And when Holly, who is very much a germaphobe, kind of, um, even pre-COVID, she's definitely going to be a masked up person, but she's also a smoker, and she can't not be a smoker. So,
Yeah.
like, sometimes she sneaks off and pulls her mask down, and because that's who the character. It's who the character is, and that's what real people did. But when she comes in contact with someone who refuses to wear a mask, she thinks of them a certain way, you know,
I'll do.
and we all do, right? And so I think that he handles it really, really, really real. Like, it's reading that book felt like, yep, that's exactly what that interaction would have been like in the fall of 2020. You know, so yeah, so there are people doing stuff like that now, but it's hard to want to put yourself back in it if you're out of it.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, So, other what else? I wanted to talk about I wanted to recommend some other Watergate stuff. If people want to be entertained and like learn more about this and without sitting down and reading a history book or without sitting down and reading all the President's Men, which I haven't read, but I bet it's good.
Yeah.
It's written by Woodward and Bernstein, for God's sake. So there've been a couple of TV series in the last 5-6 years. One is called Gaslit.
Oh.
It centers a woman in it, and I can't just I'm terrible. I don't remember her name, but played by Julia Roberts, and pardon, and it tells the story of Watergate from her perspective as someone who was stuck in the middle of it with all these people around her doing this shit. Like she was married to some. I mean, she was a power player, but very much in the middle of this thing. I highly recommend it, especially if you don't know anything about Watergate. You're like, oh, this is fucking interesting. There was also a show with Woody Harrelson and Justin Theroux called White House Plumbers. It was on HBO a few years ago. I watched a couple of episodes of that, and it was funny. Like, it's just like, oh, I feel like they're leaning into the fact that everyone involved in this is a fucking moron.
Yeah.
So recommend. And then there's a podcast called Slow Burn. They spent their first season talking about Watergate, which is also pretty interesting.
Oh, okay.
So strong recommend from me on all three of those things to anyone who wants to just do more Watergate shit. It's pretty interesting. And, you know, it's just playing with the giving more of that image to you, you know, than just what happens in because this is limited. You know, it is the experience. This movie barely touches on the fact that the New York Times was also investigating this.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a little bit of that at the beginning, but the Times was doing stuff. But Woodward and Bernstein wrote the book, and the movie got made about them, and Redford and Hoffman are in it, and they are the ones who broke Watergate historically. Yeah. Even though there were other people involved, like it, and it's cut in part because of this movie. So, what is this the EST of for you?
I'm struggling with this one. I think I'm gonna go a lighter way with it and say this is the most shadowy
It's
historical
very shadowy.
drama I have ever seen.
Very shadowy. Yeah.
Oh my God. So to the point where it took me probably an hour into the film to realize this is a choice because I was like, my God, the 70s were rough.
Mhm.
I'm like,
Yeah, no.
choice.
I think this movie is lit like a black and white movie.
Yeah.
Like the way that they're choosing to play with shadows. Yeah, I think that it's super shadowy and it's super effective because of it. But my EST is related to what you just said. This is the 70th movie for me.
Nice.
Like this movie is what the 1970s looks and feels like.
It beats Almost
You know.
Famous for you.
Yeah, just different. It's a different vibe. But you know, this is the smoking and it's this is what Inside felt like in the 1970s.
Wow.
Like it's kind of noisy. There's people everywhere. There's the phones and the smoke and the clickety clickety clickety. Like it's just
the color blocked darkness.
uh-huh.
I love that.
The distrust and paranoia.
Yeah.
Like this movie is what the 70s feels like, you know, in a certain way. So for me, it's the most that there is.
And it's here again.
Yeah, but we don't have shag carpeting anymore.
Yeah, no more shag carpeting. Different things people are smoking.
That's fair. Yep.
Weed's legal.
Thumbs up for that.
Yep.
All right. So I think that once again we have proven my theory that everything comes back to Aaron Spelling.
Even all the president's men.
Fucking Watergate, kids. Aaron Spelling. So we haven't yet discussed next week's film offering that we're going to watch in conjunction with Destiny Rides Again. I have a thought, based on the movie Donna wants to rent when they're at the video store.
What does she want to rent again?
Pretty Woman.
Oh, fuck yeah!
All right, so let's because the Pretty Woman it comes up. I mean, they talked about it in the Slumber Party. Like, it's a movie that comes up a number of times in early 90210. But that they're looking for it in the video store, and she's like, I think it was like Brenda's like, you've seen this like 1,000 times or whatever.
I'm gonna have so much for Adventures in Intimacy.
Oh my god, the whole thing. So we'll have to see, because I haven't looked at it to see what our spelling connection is. I'm assuming that there is one.
Yeah.
I'd be floored if there wasn't, to be honest with you. So maybe we do Pretty Woman next week.
Okay.
That'd be kind of fun. I haven't watched that movie in a while.
It's a good one. It's one that my mom and I are often quoting at each other, oddly enough.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. We can talk about which one of you is the prostitute then next week.
I mean, we are. Listen, we both are. It's one of our favorite phrases. There's a run in my hose. Any hose. Should be enough, dear.
Nice. All right, so I think that's it. I think that's it. I think it's Pretty Woman next week, Cheesemeisters. It was inevitable. It had to happen eventually, and it seems like a good reason to do it. All right. So until then, Cheesemeisters.
Cheers.
Cheers.